So what does it signify that Republicans ahead of the midterms believe that it's going to be so necessary to get an upper hand that they have to actually redraw an entire state's congressional maps in order to get 5 whole seats out of it?
Oh, probably the same thing that it signifies when they did it in Illinois and got a 14-3 delegation for D's. Maryland 7-1, Massachusetts 9-0. We know what happened here in New York, California. Even though they have a commission, we all know what goes on there.
In a mid-cycle specifically, are all of those cases in mid-cycles?
All of these cases are where Democrats use the power they have to give them an advantage.
But just to be clear, because I didn't do the research that you did in the break here, is it that they're changing it after the actual census process where you're supposed to create you're supposed to go through the congressional redistricting process?
Does it matter?
It kind of does.
Very much.
I think that's the whole point.
So it's okay for Democrats to lopside these states 9-0 in Massachusetts.
Here's what I will say about this. I mean,
I'm a Republican.
I don't know.
I think there should be a national framework for independent redistricting, period, full stop. I mean, gerrymandering, and let's be fair, we've seen this weaponized by both parties for decades. But these guys, this is a whole nother level of weaponization coming from the right. And what Trump did today is the ultimate tell. From my perspective, if we're going to play fair in a world that is wholly unfair, we may have the higher moral ground, but the ground is shifting from underneath us. And I think we have to wake up to that reality. And I'm talking to members of my legislature, what are our alternatives? We can do a special session. I can call for one today if I chose to. We can then put something on the ballot, and I could call a special election. We can change the Constitution with the consent of the voters, and I think we would win that. I think people understand what's at stake in California. I think we'd come out in record numbers. I think it would be extraordinary success. That's a clean way of doing it. It'd be a very short window because you got to come back with the maps and you got to change all this and prepare for the ballots that are around the corner next year. Or you can look at other avenues, which we are exploring, which are pathways with the legislature to do urgency clauses with 2/3 of the legislature in both of our houses, to move forward with legislative redistricting in between the constitutional construct, which is every census, the Independent Redistricting Commission does a new map, but it's silent about what happens in between. So it's a novel legal question, and it's being explored.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So we got to continue our coverage of the Democrats panicking, in full-blown panic mode, over the proposed plan by Republicans to redistrict Texas, to redraw the congressional lines in Texas. And Democrats are now crying foul. Now, we talked about this story before, okay, maybe like a week ago, where I explained to you guys the hypocrisy of the Democrats boohoo whining crime, because they asked for this, okay? After the maps were redrawn in 2021, Democrats were boohoo whining crying racism, right? They was like, oh, this is racist. You can't have all these black people and so-called black and brown people in the same district, right? At the time, they felt like that was not advantageous to the Democrats.
The Justice Department is suing the state of Texas over its new redistricting maps. The lawsuit claims the redrawn boundaries discriminate against minority voters. Joe Kalia live in Washington with more on the Biden administration's first legal challenge to a state's redistricting maps. Joe?
Yeah, Adrian, so the Department of Justice says that not only do these new district maps violate the Voting Rights Act, but they also make the claim that they discriminate against black and Latino voters. So we're going to lay out exactly what the Department of Justice says in their case. They say that Texas, over the past 10 years, has gained about 4 million people in population. Now, because of that, Texas has earned 2 new congressional seats. And about 95% of that population growth, the DOJ says, was black and Hispanic voters. So you might expect that these 2 new congressional districts would be majority black or Hispanic, and we can put them up on your screen here. They are not. The way that they are drawn, some of those communities that are heavily black and Hispanic are sort of drawn out. You can see the way that those district lines are. They're not only majority white, but they are heavily majority white. And so what that does, in effect, is it sort of diminishes black and brown voters as a voting bloc. Here's what Valerie Gupta from the Department of Justice said about this last night.
Decade after decade, courts have found that Texas has enacted redistricting plans that deliberately dilute the voting strength of Latino and black voters.
And the Trump administration in 2025 came out and said, hey, yeah, you know what? We think that these maps are racist, right? We need to have the maps redrawn, right? And now Democrats are crying foul. They're saying, no, it's actually racist to redraw the maps that they claim were racist in the first place, okay? Because now in 2025, it is at the advantage of Republicans, or at least presumably at the advantage of Republicans, to redraw the map, and that could result in Democrats like Jasmine Crockett, Al Green, again, some of these woke lunatics, right? It can result in them losing their seats, right? Them being out of a job. So they're in full-blown panic mode. And then you have Democrats now proposing to gerrymander their states, right? Their blue states. They're proposing to do the same thing that Texas is doing in order to try to get more Democrat seats, right? So they're openly saying, hey, you know what? We're going to rig our elections. We're going to rig our state maps in order to get more blue seats because we don't like what Texas is doing. Because, again, they're in full-blown panic mode about the fact that it looks like they're not going to be doing well in the midterms, okay? We've talked about this. We've talked about the data out there that suggests that Democrats are behind. They've made zero progress since the election when it comes to reviving their party, and it's not looking good for them. Again, this is why they're now considering the nuclear option. Take a look.
And these Republicans are trying to disenfranchise millions of voters in Texas as part of a scheme to rig the midterm election. What we're committed to doing as Democrats in New York, in California, in New Jersey, across the country, is make sure that the congressional maps are as fair as possible. The people of Texas are at risk of not having fair maps. We have a responsibility of making sure that we look at every single state of the union and do what we can to ensure that we maximize fairness in those jurisdictions.
Match fire with fire. I think Democrats in the past too often have been more concerned with being right than being in power. And we've seen Republicans only care about being in power regardless of what is right.
So you support the Newsom effort because California right now has an independent commission that does districts in as fair a way as possible, in nonpartisan way as possible. You're saying Democrats should, even though you don't approve of it, Democrats should do it too.
We have to get serious. We have to be absolutely ruthless about getting back in power. So, yes, in California, in Illinois, in New York, wherever we have the trifecta of power, we have to use that to its absolute extent. And then the last thing, this may end up biting Republicans in the ass. You have the possibility that they will disperse Republican voters to make up these 3 or 4 or 5 new congressional districts and put those districts in play. So in Texas, we've got to get out there and register and meet the voters who are going to decide the outcomes in these next elections if they're successful with this redistricting. Our group, Powered by People, is doing this right now on the ground. We can't wait for 2026. We got to do the work right now in 2025.
So Texas is a majority minority state, and they don't feel comfortable having to go and present their very much racist policies, the policies that people like the Proud Boys are excited about, the people like the Oath Keepers, people like, you know, we saw on January 6th, those guys. So that's what they're going to do. They are going to minimize people of color's voices, and they truly believe that by pushing their white supremacy agenda, they will be able to then secure more Republican seats. I've got news for them. I believe in the people of Texas, and I believe that this may backfire in a really unprecedented way. In fact, I will tell you confidently that there are absolutely Republicans that currently are serving that are concerned as well, and they should be concerned that this may backfire on them as they try to create these seats, because there will be new vulnerabilities. And I promise you, I am going to do everything that I can to make sure that Texans know what is at stake and understand that they are trying to basically put their voices on mute, and it is time to raise the volume on their voices. And so we will work and outwork this gerrymander to make sure that Texas actually shows up and shows out, and Donald Trump is left being the crybaby that he is.
I'm talking to members of my legislature. What are our alternatives? We can do a special session. I can call for one today if I chose to. We can then put something on the ballot, and I could call a special election. We can change the Constitution with the consent of the voters, and I think we would win that.
Wow. Your reaction, Carl? Bring it on, Governor. Call your special session, and it'll just reveal that you're trying to rig an election. Out here in California, we have a state constitutional amendment that says that it has to be a citizens initiative, a citizens commission, not legislators, not the governor. The governor is violating state law just by talking about redistricting maps. And so Newsom is trying to rig the election.
Yeah, so I want you guys to understand just how silly and hypocritical the Democrats look right now, okay? Because they're the ones in 2021 that said that the maps in Texas were racist, okay? The Biden Justice Department sued over these so-called racist maps. The Trump administration comes in, their DOJ says, hey, you know what? We do think that these maps are racist. You guys need to redraw the lines. Democrats are now crying foul because Texas redrawing these lines would now give them an opportunity to add more seats. Well, the reason why is because Republicans have gained more power and control in Texas, right? I mean, we saw the last election, how it went for Texas. They gained more ground than they had in 2020. So presumably, new seats would produce more red seats. Again, that's in theory. It's not guaranteed. Again, this is why this is risky, right? It's a risky thing to do. But hey, if it works out, then it'll be great for Republicans and it'll be devastating for Democrats. Now, again, the hypocrisy is that Democrats are now complaining and crying racism over Texas doing something that they sued Texas to do, right, in 2021, right? Like, they sued Texas to redraw the lines because they said that they were racist. The Trump administration agrees, and they're crying racism over that, right, over something that they wanted, which tells you what this is all about, right? It wasn't about these lines being quote-unquote racist or the redistricting being racist. No, it wasn't about that. It was about the fact that Democrats felt like the lines were not drawn in a way that was advantageous for their power and control. And they cried racism over that. Again, not because the drawings were actually racist, right? The maps were racist. No. Again, it's about Democrat power and control because now they're getting what they want and they're still crying racism, right? It's almost as if it wasn't really about racism. It was about Democrat power and control. And they just used the accusation of racism as a way to justify them trying to sue for more power and control. That's what's going on here, right? Because now they're accusing Texas of rigging their elections, right? Rigging the midterms, okay? This is what they're accusing Texas of doing. But yet they're turning around and saying that, well, we're going to do it too, right? We're going to rig our elections. And when we rig our elections, oh no, you don't understand. We're just fighting back against Texas, right? We're just making sure everything is fair. Texas, they're rigging it. Even though Democrats begged them to quote unquote rig it, okay, for years over racism, right? They begged Texas to do it. Texas is now doing it. And then Democrats are like, well, we got to do it too because Texas is rigging their election. So we got to rig ours. Again, amazing. Absolutely amazing. So with that being said, let's react to this news clip about the redistricting fight in Texas.
More seats. Do you want the Republicans to draw 5? I think we get 5. And there could be some other states we're going to get another 3 or 4 or 5 in addition. Texas would be the biggest one.
It is about racism, and it's about partisan Republican racism, a desire to eliminate black representation, weaken Latino representation in the Congress of the United States of America.
To the victor go the spoils, and in 2025, President Donald Trump is playing the hardest kind of hardball, ordering via the Justice Department, ruling Texas Republicans to redraw election maps mid-decade to eliminate, quote, racial gerrymandering. Facing an existential threat, Texas congressional Democrats are calling on progressive state lawmakers to block the redistricting effort by any and all means necessary.
Texas Democrats need to have every option on the table. That includes breaking quorum, having filibusters, marching in the streets.
Panel, the coming anything goes cage match unfolding within a special session already jam-packed with marquee, highly consequential issues. Paul Castro, how do you see this unfolding in Austin?
So the last election, there was 58% of the vote went Republican. They currently have 66% of seats. What they're looking to do is expand that to 80% of seats. That's a big grab, in those two areas. But the other part is everything, in order to make that happen, the redistricting is going to have to reach far up into Northwest Texas to grab seats to grab votes that are predominantly Republican. And what happens is the big, centers, so you have DFW, Austin, San Antonio, and Houston, all kind of look like a swirl, where what they're having to do is gerrymander in such a way that they're carving out seats that are going to be specifically Democratic, and I think they're going to leave 8 seats for Democrats. And then the rest are going to have to be carved out and then combined with people all the way out to Austin in order to dilute the Democratic votes in the city. So anyway, it's going to be an interesting and I think dangerous possible move for the Republicans.
All right, Tamara Bell, at a fundamental fairness level, you have huge problems with this.
Look, it is exactly what Al Green said that this is. This is about literally obliterating Democratic votes in the state of Texas. But let me tell you about redistricting. It is a decade process. You do it every decade. To do this midterm like this shows you not only the callous indifference that they have for the Democratic votes, which they've already demonstrated by not filling Sheila Jackson Lee's seat and leaving the 18th congressional district with no representation. They've already done that. But the fact that the Republicans, who barely won, maybe they had a 60% or 59%, it may obliterate their seats, because people who might have voted for them 5 years ago may not even be here anymore, where younger people are growing, older people are not. And so this is a very, very capricious action for them to consider doing. So let me say this to my Democrats in Austin: walk y'all ass out of there if y'all see them about to do this.
Bob, is there a risk of diluting existing Republican seats to the point they become vulnerable?
Well, I think there are several Republican congressmen that are concerned about that. And when you start pulling districts that are dark red and making them pink, or even making them slightly purple, you run the risk of a good candidate coming into one of those places and taking that, or making candidates that wouldn't necessarily have to spend a lot of money on re-election efforts have to dip into their coffers and raise a lot of money to keep their seats. The danger in this is, let's say Texas picks up 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 Republican seats. California does the same thing. They pick up 10 Democrat seats. New York does the same thing. They pick up 5 or 10 Democrat seats. Well, what have you done? You've set a dangerous precedent that you can just come in anytime you feel like it and redistrict for the purposes of changing the outcome of elections. And I think it's a bad idea. I hope the legislature is smart enough to keep this discussion to the end of the special session so that we can get the important work done and then deal with this then.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Basically, it's not a guaranteed thing. Now, if it's not a guaranteed thing in Texas, then why would you assume that it's a guaranteed thing in New York or California, right? So, in my opinion, if Republicans move forward with this, it's a risky thing. And ultimately today, I mean, you got to understand that maybe this might not work out the way that they intend for it to work out. But I think it's just funny to me how Democrats are crying about this when this is what they asked for, right? They wanted the maps to be redrawn, and now they're claiming that it's racist to redraw what they said were racist maps, right? It's just hilarious, okay? So we're going to see what Democrats do if they decide to redraw or to gerrymander their maps in states like California, in New York. Then I can imagine, red states or Republican states are going to do the exact same thing. And ultimately, there will be a balance here, right? There will be a balance if it becomes a full-blown gerrymandering war, okay? I mean, let's be real. Democrats already do this in their states. They're just boohoo whining and crying about Texas doing it because Democrats are on the ropes, right? They have to win the midterms or it's over for their party, right? If Democrats lose the midterms, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that they're not winning for another decade, right? At least they're not winning any major presidential election for another decade, right? They might win a midterm or two, here and there, but they're not winning any like major national elections, like a presidential election for another decade if they lose these midterms, right? Democrats have to win the midterms. It is a must-win situation. It is a do-or-die situation. Their party is on life support, and that's why they're panicking about this, because you don't see this type of panic when it comes to Democrats gerrymandering, which they do all the time, right? It happens all the time in blue states. They don't panic. They don't come in and talk about all the elections rigged, blah, 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 right? And Republicans gerrymander too, right? But this specific situation out in Texas is super important because Democrats have to win the midterms. If they lose the midterms, it's over for their party. Their party is going to be dead and gone if they lose the midterms, at least for another decade. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.